The murmur of crystal glasses and soft jazz filled the Prestige Club, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The scent of truffle butter and aged wine hung in the air, until a voice sliced through the luxury. "I'll give you $100,000 if you serve me in Chinese." Every fork froze midair. Heads turned. The speaker, Richard Blackwood, reclined in a leather chair at the center of the room, a smirk pulling at his tan face. A mountain of green bills, $100, $000 in crisp cash, fell onto a silver tray held by a waitress. The bills shimmered like a cruel spotlight on Jasmine Williams, 29, who stood motionless in her black uniform, the epitome of professionalism. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stared at the pile of money. 2 years of salary, enough to pay her mother's medical bills, enough to save her sister's education. But she knew this wasn't about money. It was about humiliation. Richard leaned back and raised a champagne glass toward 3 Japanese investors seated beside him. "My friends here will judge if her Chinese is any good," he said mockingly. The men exchanged uneasy looks. The eldest, Hiroshi Tanaka, frowned in discomfort, but Richard didn't notice. The restaurant, once a sanctuary of quiet sophistication, became a modern Roman arena. The audience, New York's elite, pretended to eat, but their attention was locked on Jasmine and the man trying to make her crawl. Jasmine's heart pounded. Once, she had been Dr. Jasmine Williams, a linguistics prodigy and university lecturer fluent in 9 languages. 3 years ago, everything changed. Her mother's stroke, mounting medical bills, insurance refusals, one disaster after another until she lost her apartment, her job, and her reputation. Now she worked double shifts, waitress by night, caregiver by day, barely surviving. Richard smirked. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Is $100,000 not enough? You probably don't even know how to say thank you in Chinese." Laughter rippled through nearby tables. Something inside Jasmine hardened. "I accept," she said firmly. A collective gasp swept through the room. Richard blinked, briefly caught off guard. "What was that?" "I said, I accept your offer, Mr. Blackwood. I'll serve you in Chinese, and when I'm done, you'll pay me here, in front of everyone." Richard's grin returned, sharp and mocking. "Perfect. Let's make this more interesting." He turned toward the investors. "Gentlemen, watch closely. You're about to see the difference between confidence and delusion." The eldest investor spoke again. "Richard, perhaps this isn't—" No, Hiroshi," Richard interrupted. "This is fun. This is a lesson." The waitress, no, the scholar he thought was beneath him, stood still, her eyes calm, her tray balanced perfectly. Her silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. She had spent years studying phonetics, tone, and dialectal variations at Columbia and MIT. She had lectured on Mandarin tonal morphology to rooms full of professors. He had no idea who he was challenging. Richard raised his voice again, enjoying the attention. "If she fails, she'll apologize to all of us for wasting our time." The investors looked uncomfortable, but Richard basked in the growing spectacle. "And if she somehow succeeds," he added smugly, "she gets the money. But if she fails, she kneels here and admits she's a fraud." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "I accept all your terms." The air thickened with tension. Even the waiters stopped moving. Richard laughed. "You're serious? You'll kneel if you lose?" "If I fail, yes. But when I succeed, you'll pay me and you'll apologize." The investors whispered among themselves. They could see what Richard could not, that her confidence wasn't arrogance. It was earned, forged in survival. Richard clapped mockingly. "Then let's get started. Bring the Shanghai investor menu, the one with all the special dishes." The waiter hesitated. "Sir, that menu has over 40 items, all written in technical Mandarin." "Perfect," Richard interrupted, laughing. "If she really knows Chinese, she won't have trouble with that." The investors shifted uneasily. Hiroshi spoke again. "This is unkind, Richard." "Unkind?" Richard sneered. "It's educational." But as the waiter placed a heavy leather-bound menu before Jasmine, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. The gold-embossed Chinese characters weren't unfamiliar. They were textbook material, terminology she had once studied during her research at Beijing Foreign Studies University. "Can I choose the dishes myself?" Jasmine asked. "Of course. Pick the easiest ones," Richard said with a laugh. "You'll fail anyway." While he gloated, Jasmine's mind was already switching modes. She remembered sleepless nights in Beijing, reciting the culinary lexicon of Sichuan and Shanghai cuisines, mastering the rhythm of every tone until it became music. She remembered her mentor, Professor Chini Ming, telling her, "True fluency is not in words. It's in understanding the soul of a culture." She opened the menu. Scanning quickly, her pulse steadied. She was home. Before beginning, she asked quietly, "Are any of you fluent in Mandarin?" Hiroshi blinked. "A little." Kenji shook his head, but the third investor, Yuki Sato, raised his hand. "I am. I lived in Taiwan for 10 years. A murmur spread through the room. Richard's smirk wavered slightly. "Good," Jasmine said softly. "Then you can judge me fairly." Richard scoffed. "You really think you can fool a native speaker?" Jasmine met his gaze with unflinching calm. "I don't fool people, Mr. Blackwood. I educate them." A hush fell. Then she added, "Since you claim this is about integrity, let's raise the stakes. If I can not only describe 5 dishes, but also explain their regional origin, preparation, and cultural context, you double the amount, $200,000. Gasps filled the room. Richard's eyes narrowed. "And if you fail?" "I'll work here for free for a month." Even the investors looked stunned. Hiroshi whispered, "This is madness." But pride chained Richard's reason. He couldn't back down in front of witnesses. "Deal," he said, shaking her hand. $200,000 if you succeed." Their handshake sealed a duel of arrogance versus mastery. As the last echoes faded, the crowd leaned in. The air buzzed with anticipation. Jasmine straightened her shoulders, opened the menu, and prepared to remind the room that true power is never loud. Her lips parted, and with flawless, melodious Mandarin, she began. The restaurant was silent enough to hear the clink of a spoon from across the room. Every eye was locked on Jasmine Williams as she took a slow breath and began speaking, smoothly, confidently, and with the grace of a symphony. "Honored guests, welcome to Prestige. Our first recommendation is Hong Xiao Shizi Tu, a delicacy from Yangzhou, Jiangsu, symbolizing unity and good fortune." Her tone was perfect, her rhythm authentic. The investors froze, eyes widening. It wasn't just good Chinese, it was poetic. She continued without pause. The second dish, mapo tofu, a signature of Sichuan cuisine, famous for its numbing spice, representing resilience and passion. Her pronunciation carried the precise tonal melody of a native. The eldest investor, Hiroshi, whispered to Yuki in astonishment, "She sounds like a Beijing broadcaster." Jasmine moved gracefully, describing 5 dishes in total, each with context, origin, and meaning. The crowd had forgotten their wine and their meals. Even the pianist had stopped mid-song. She finished her final explanation, bowing slightly. "Thank you for choosing our restaurant. May these dishes let you taste not only flavor, but the warmth of culture itself." Then silence. Pure, awestruck silence. Yuki Sato, the Taiwanese investor, leaned forward slowly and said in perfect English, "Her pronunciation is flawless. Her vocabulary advanced. I have met professors in Taipei who would applaud her command of the language." The room erupted in gasps. Richard's smirk faltered, his face paling under the golden chandelier. For the first time that night, the king of arrogance looked like a child who had set fire to his own throne. He forced a laugh, trying to recover. "Fine. You rehearsed. That doesn't mean—" But Hiroshi stood abruptly, cutting him off. "Richard, stop. You made a bet, and you lost." Richard turned, stunned. "Excuse me?" Yuki continued, calm but firm. "Not only did she serve you in flawless Mandarin, she educated us all about Chinese culture. You owe her $200,000 and an apology." A murmur swept the room like a wave. Phones began recording. Jasmine stood still, her chin raised, her eyes unwavering. Richard's jaw clenched. For years, he'd used money to command respect, to bend people into silence. But tonight, it wasn't money that won, it was dignity. She stepped closer, her voice low and even. You thought knowledge was cheap, Mr. Blackwood, but it's the one thing your wealth can't buy. The investors nodded solemnly. Pay her, Hiroshi said simply. The air tightened. Every second stretched. Then, reluctantly, Richard reached for his checkbook. His hands trembled as he signed the amount, $200,000. He ripped out the check and handed it to her, without meeting her eyes. But Jasmine didn't take it immediately. And the apology? She asked softly. He looked up, rage flickering behind his forced grin. But the weight of every watching eye crushed his pride. Slowly, painfully, he muttered, I'm sorry. Louder, someone whispered. He exhaled shakily, his voice breaking through clenched teeth. I'm sorry for disrespecting you. Jasmine finally accepted the check, folding it carefully into her pocket. Not as a prize, but as proof. Proof that even the loudest arrogance can't drown the quiet strength of self-respect. The investor stood and bowed slightly toward her. Miss Williams, Yuki said, you have honored both our cultures tonight. The restaurant erupted into applause. Even the pianist resumed playing, soft, elegant notes that carried like a victory hymn. As she turned to leave, the maitre d' stopped her, tears in his eyes. Miss Williams, I've never seen anything like that. If you ever want a recommendation or your own restaurant, I'll make the call myself. She smiled. Thank you. But I think I've served enough for one night. Outside, the cold New York wind kissed her cheeks as she stepped into the night. She glanced at the check again. Enough to pay her mother's hospital bills in full, and maybe, just maybe, start fresh. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Your mother's surgery was a success. She's awake and asking for you. Tears blurred the lights of the city. She whispered into the night, We did it, Mom. And somewhere behind her, in that glittering restaurant, Richard Blackwood sat in silence, his reflection in the wine glass reminding him that power isn't measured in money, but in humility. The end.